I think at this point in time, 1 minute past, I would like to bid everybody welcome to session 6 of LIBER 21. The future is open, democratization of knowledge, a session that I have been looking really forward to chairing. Before we start and I present the program and the speakers, please note that this session is being recorded and we will, through LIBER, share the slides afterwards. This is what you could call a classic LIBER webinar. There will be 3 presentations. And what we will try to do is by the end of each session to field questions. And if you have questions, please type them into the attendee chat. And I will monitor them along with our good colleague Tanya from LIBER. Also, if you do have technical issues of some kind, of course, there is setting an internet connection, but you could also try writing in the chat and Tanya might be able to troubleshoot it for you. So please remember that and enjoy the session, which I am presenting quickly now. My name is Thomas Kosted. I am the Deputy Library Director of the University Library of Southern Denmark. And I spend most of my time working and running the SDU Citizen Science Knowledge Lab. Today, we will have 3 themes within the democratization of knowledge. And also the future is open, which might be a new link in the LIBER strategy. First of all, data, a seminal relationship by Martin Munke. Then leverage an open science infrastructure to enable visual discovery in library systems by Kraker and Beate Guba. And at the very end, a speed talk by our colleagues from Canada, Heather Saunders, Jimmy Orr, and Brian Selman. So first of all, for timekeeping, Martin Munke has 30 minutes, including questions. Then the double talk by Kraker and Beate Guba is 40 minutes, and the speed talk has been extended a little bit at the end to 20 minutes. So, first of all, remember to type in your questions if you have any in the chat, and I will monitor that. Thank you in advance for your participation. And with that, Martin, please, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to present here today at the conference. I'm sharing my screen. I hope everybody can see the slides.
Yes. Okay,
here we go. Yeah, I want to talk about a topic that has some tradition within LIBER, but in Germany, where I'm heading from, has only recently gained in importance. I'd like to present to you the concept of open citizen science, a combination of 2 well-known and largely discussed concepts within the conceptual field of open knowledge, namely, on the one hand, open science as a movement to make scientific research and its dissemination accessible to all levels of an inquiring society, and secondly, citizen science as the participation of the general public in the scientific research process, to use some very short definitions. In the application of this concept, I see the possibility for libraries to combine tasks of university and regional libraries with 2 aims. The first one, to establish themselves as a hub for the exchange between professional and voluntary science. And secondly, to anchor themselves anew in their regional research environment and also in the cultural life of their region. So 2 aims in order to deal with the kind of identity crisis that came for some libraries, or for all libraries within the digital age. My working background is the Saxon State and Universal Library in Dresden. You can see our main building here and our main reading room behind me. The library has 3 tasks. At first, it is a Landesbibliothek, which is very difficult to translate into English, mostly translated as regional library. So we collect and archive publications about Saxony, as well as publications subject to delivery in Saxony, the mandatory copies. Secondly, we are the University Library of the University of Technology in Dresden. And so we provide information infrastructures for a research-intensive university with a particularly broad range of subjects. And third, we are a state library, which fulfills important coordination and service functions for the other, especially scientific libraries in the Free State of Saxony. Yeah, and beyond this, behind this background, I'd like to present the following points you can see here on the outline. And I'd like to begin with a very general question. Why should libraries commit to such an approach like open citizen science? Or going a little beyond, as you can see here in the headline, what is a library today? So a very broad question. If we look at classical definitions of a library, we can only read out such references to topics like open citizen science with difficulty. As an example, I have brought with me some paragraphs from the introductory part of the corresponding lemma from one of the largest open science and also citizen science projects in the world, the Wikipedia. And I'd like to read it out. A library is a collection of materials, books, or media that are easily accessible for use and not just for display purposes. A library provides physical or digital access to materials and may be a physical location or virtual space or both. A library's collection can include printed materials and other physical resources in many formats, such as DVDs, CDs, and cassette, as well as access to information, music, or other content held on bibliographic databases. So that's the opening part of the Wikipedia lemma for libraries. A rather old-fashioned way, I think, of describing the places where we work, isn't it? Later on in the article, we have a few references to the possible roles of libraries like as community hubs or the like. But in the main, we have here a picture of libraries as a quiet study space in this article. But contrary to this public perception, we are all affected in our daily work by the challenges that the information and science society brings with us. We are dealing with declining loan numbers, changing user behavior, while the internet seems to provide the answers to all kinds of questions that patrons might ask us in our holdings in a seemingly uncomplicated way. And at the same time, populism and fake news, not only, but also on the net, are challenges that our societies and that we as libraries and as librarians have to face. And it's precisely at this point, at the question of a reflective and conscious handling of information, that I see the possibility of finding a potential answer to the question of what a library could be in the digital age by applying the concept of open citizen science. Which brings me to my second point, citizen science in and with libraries, always from the German perspective, I have to say here. At the SLUB, the concept of citizen science or citizen sciences, maybe we use the plural, is an important reference point for updating the role of our institution, especially in the work of the Saxonica department that I lead, so where we have the literature about Saxony, its history, its culture, and so on. That's also programmatically taken up in the title of our new strategy paper, which reads Sharing Knowledge, Connecting People. And especially the strategic guiding principle, People Makes Libraries, shows our vision here, which is a cooperation at eye level between staff and patrons as researchers. But it's important to bear in mind that libraries have had a long and close relationship with civic research. Similar to archives, there were already an important part in the 19th century, for example, in the formation of historical societies. These relationships continue today, although the formats have changed in many cases. And we have to say that libraries in Germany rarely use the term citizen science or comparable terms to describe their involvement in this area, and there's little programmatic and little strategic work using this term. And we have to say in general that it's largely undefined for the cultural sciences and humanities, where I come from. I'm a historian by training. In contrast, the concept of crowdsourcing is addressed and used much more frequently as a partial aspect of citizen science. But we at SLUB want to go beyond this and thus also partially move our gaze away from our own holdings, although of course we use it when applying this concept. Here you can see the example of an online platform for georeferencing our historical map holdings, the Virtual Map Forum 2.0. But at the same time, so when we look at these traditions, it becomes clear that cooperations between libraries and citizens can and must function in several directions. So we have to go beyond the mere ability of citizen scientists to participate in the research process. I think it also depends on the ability to cooperate of different intra and extra academic actors, such as libraries. And to unfold this a little bit more, I'd like to take a closer look at the two concepts. My third point. Open science and citizen science are buzzwords that have recently appeared in many places in the discourse on science, and Eva Mendes has shown the different umbrellas this morning. We can put them under in her talk. There are some difference between the two, but also many points of contact. They are both points of reference in current research policy discourses, which increasingly relate to each other, to cite two German scientists here. The former, open science, appears to be more of a technology-driven concept, I think, while the latter is more participation and actor-centered. As the following figure shows, where we see different aspects that belong to both topics, while in the middle we see the points where they overlap and where they can relate very easily to each other, which is the accessibility of research results and processes and the participation of volunteers in research. But on the other hand, we have different aspects that are not so easily to connect within both concepts. These more at SLB, we follow a more actor-centered approach that also has a spatial component that can refer to both physical and virtual spaces, which is especially important in times of the corona pandemic, also to use virtual spaces and not just physical ones. So to give you a definition, what we understand as open citizen science, here comes the data in from the title of the presentation. And we see open citizen science as the handling of open cultural data by citizen scientists and the presentation of the results open for subsequent use and further processing, so that the citizen scientists not only use the data for themselves, but give it away for others also. And cultural data or open cultural data we understand as digitized publications and objects from so-called GLAM institutions. So you all may know the acronym: galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Then their machine readable and structured content and metadata, and their open curation, editing, and further processing. At first, this also sounds very technical and prepositional. So I'd like to illustrate a model of what this could like in my next point. This is also at first a bit theoretic, but I will explain an example where I've used this later on. So we start with cultural data. For example, a historical source that has been digitized by a library is available in their digital collections. Secondly, we have volunteers or citizen scientists, we may discuss the terms later, that describe that transcribe this historical source. They can do that for their own systems, but they can also use open systems like Wikisource, for example. The next step could be to further describe and to index that historical source in open systems also, like Wikidata, for example. Then the citizen scientists, together with librarians or on their own, can work further on with the data. And we have to say that that must not be the same persons everywhere, but can be different persons dealing with the same material. We can create queries, we can create visualizations, linkages between different topics, different sources that have been digitized by another library, for example. And we can go on further at the library with the task to reintegrate the data that is used there into our own directory systems to ensure long-term availability, and so on and so on. So that model follows to some extent the data enrichment workflows that Tomasz Tasovac has showed yesterday in his speech. There he referred to scholars and libraries, but we can also use this model for the cooperation between libraries and citizen scientists. Yeah, and then we can go on with the next, and so on, and so on, and so on. An example would be, we have digitized some years ago various historical accounts of Saxon industrial history that have been edited in this way. So we had no OCR at the time when we digitized that material. Later on, there were some volunteers that described that source in Wikisource, and together with librarians, we had a closer look at that one. We indexed that text with the help of Wikidata, though where we can use named entities and so on. And then, yeah, followed that model a bit. And one way of the data back into the library was a media station we used in an exhibition on the topic of Saxon industrial history last year. We deliberately use these free accessible and digital systems like Wikisource, like Wikidata, outside of our own library infrastructure in order to reach citizens, researchers where they deal with that topics as a matter of course today. So in that environment where they are, and where they also use the diverse digital or digitized materials from the libraries, not only from ours, but from others too. And I think that also means that we have to learn to accept the concept of fluidity that Tolma talked about yesterday too. So that we do not have our hands alone on that data, but there are others that can work with it. In the next step of the presentation, I'd like to relate our activities a bit to the proposals of the LIBER Open Science roadmap. I hope you can read it all. At the slide, I've taken the recommendations for citizen science to promote the library as an active partner in citizen science and develop the necessary infrastructure, to use the library's role as an organization and managing body to ensure that responsible conduct and good scholarly practice are respected when participating in citizen science, to develop a set of guidelines, including methodologies and policies for citizen science activities involving the library, and to develop the necessary skills to be a strong and active partner in citizen science. There are some current approaches at SLUB. We are on the way, and as we heard in the workshop before, every library has to find some kind of an own way in this area. To give some examples, for the first recommendation, yeah, we like to promote our library via the playing of an active role in local, regional, and supra-regional contexts, via our publication activity, and via the use of existing infrastructures and staff of the library. So to take methodologies and so on from our head as university library, also in cooperation with citizen scientists. For the second recommendation, we conduct appropriate training and courses for citizen scientists to introduce them to the requirements of good scholarly praxis. And maybe for the fourth recommendation, we are also learning by doing via constant contact with citizen scientists and partners. Relatively new in this area are our labs as physical but also virtual spaces where cooperation and exchange can take place. The first one being the SLUB Text Lab, where we conduct work with texts, analog as well as digital. That lab is mainly an interface to the campus of the university. But we also work there with citizen scientists with text and with text as data. Second one is our Open Science Lab, where we bundle our research-related services such as open access consulting, bibliometrics, and so on. But we also use the training and the courses we give there to help and to support citizen scientists. And what we have learned so far in the last years is my last point. Networks and corporations, we can't do this alone. We cooperate with citizen scientists on the one hand with civic associations, but also with research institutions. May they belong to the university or maybe outside of the university. So that is the point where we are coming back to the actors or to agency in this field. I have brought with me here some examples to show you the different levels where cooperation can take place, who our partners are. These are associations for history, for genealogy, and so on, but that are also individual persons at a local level, but also at the region level. So with different associations, but also with other memory institutions, libraries, archives, and museums. And next to that is the point where we go next to the civil society, but also cooperate with science and science communication actors, with the universities, especially in my case with the chairs for Saxon history in Dresden and Leipzig, and with research institutes from different disciplines that are active in this field, but also on a super regional or national level with actors that try to implement citizen scientists, that try to implement citizen science on that scale. To give you some examples from the last month, we had some online training courses for local history researchers that explain the use of open cultural data. But we also had online training workshops for a professional scientific audience on how citizen science as a concept can be integrated into university research. So we see there are different target groups that we'd like to reach out to, civic actors, science, and we also like to kind of bridge the gaps between the memory institutions, libraries, archives, and museums, where we closely work together with archives, museums less at the moment, but I hope that will change in the future, as I think that libraries should look beyond their own nose and check if necessary we adopt what works well in other areas. To come to an end and to come back to the initial question, what's the point of all of this? What can be the role of libraries in this field? As you may have seen, or I hope that you have seen that, our role can be to build links between traditional and new forms of citizen science, but also that have each their own understandings and own approaches to their topics, but also links between different civic and institutional actors. We have to admit that there are always challenges, due to conflicts of resources and of interests. But nevertheless, in my opinion, the concept of open citizen science can contribute to fulfill a central promise of citizen science, which is to open science to society, to involve citizens in research processes, and thus to contribute to a deeper exchange between people of different interests. The fulfillment of this promise is at the moment, I think, both a thesis and a vision, more a vision. It has not been yet realized, or only to a limited extent, but together with others, with our partners, I think we would like to continue working on this. As the LIBER Open Science Roadmap states at the end of this chapter on citizen science, the possibilities are seemingly endless, which I would like to underline. So I think that libraries, citizen science, and open data brought together in this concept of open citizen science, this can indeed be a seminal relationship. So thank you very much for your attention. On the last slide, I have some literature on the topic which is not complete and which lists mainly contributions from our perspective and are therefore mostly in German. Yeah, but thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for sharing the impressive work that you do at your library. I would like to encourage attendees to ask questions in the chat, and we will monitor that. But as we have a few minutes, Martin, if you don't mind, I have a comment and a question for you. You mentioned in the end a quote by Paul Ehrlich, a couple of years old now, the future, the possibilities are endless. And I think some of the work that I've been in monitoring, how could a library work with citizen science? And Paul Ehrlich and Tiberius Ignat had coined the bespoke model or a hub. And I just think it's very, very impressive that you managed to build up your own model which fits the needs and the competences of your library and are able to put that on the tracks. And it's just to say that I think it's working within citizen science is definitely not one size fits all. And I think it's impressive the way that you have coined your own role in this. But back to my question, you mentioned in your one of your last slides, both that you are working on guidelines and skills, and I'm a little bit interested. The guidelines you are currently working on, could you perhaps elaborate or discuss a little bit about what you are envisioning with regards to that?
Yeah. These guidelines I mentioned there, that is at the moment more something for internal use. Okay. As I've mentioned at the beginning, we have this strategic paper where citizen science is also mentioned and adopted. And with these internal guidelines, yeah, we try to set or specify a set of rules for us where we would like to engage more and where we should better leave the field to others in order to use our competences also as best as we can. So that is at the moment nothing for the open it's something for us internal, but we will share it with our partners, for example, so that they can see where are maybe the points where we can cooperate even closer.
I think another question I might have for you, if you can elaborate a little bit. It seems that you have committed some resources to this project. Could you elaborate a little bit? Because some of the things that typically pops up when talking about citizen science and libraries, we don't know if we have the right people, we don't know if we have the right skills, we don't know if we have the right competences. Could you elaborate a little bit on that with regards to your organization, and if you had any conversations or if you have identified some interesting things for the audience?
Yeah. What is important for us, I think, is first that we see them ourselves in this field, both as librarians and also as citizen scientists ourselves to some extent. So this is nothing that we just do at work, but also in our free time to some extent. People that are working within Wikipedia or Wikisource or Wikidata that are not only by profession, but also by interest and part of this world. And these people can be the connectors also between this world, and they know where the patrons are, what their questions are. And secondly, we do not all of this by ourselves, but we are open to react to questions that are brought to us by citizen scientists So if they have, if they have their requirements, we try to find a solution where we can help, and it has shown that these open frameworks are helpful for many of them. But it's kind of a reaction and of being open to react and not to give your own systems always as the best solution, but to be open also to engage ourselves in these environments.
And we have one last question, Martin, before I hand over. Vivek Rapp asking in the chat, in our library, we want to start working with citizen science, but our resources are small. What would be the most important things to start with in your experience?
Yeah, I think the first one would be that openness. So to look, okay, here are our patrons, what are their interests? What do they need in order to support their research? And I'm perfectly aware that this can lead to the answer, well, we do not have the resources to support that at that point. And here it is where the network thing comes into place, because we often mediate or communicate such questions with our partners. So maybe the archive or the museum or the research institute is the right one to address with a specific question. So being in contact, that is exactly this hub thing, I think. And being open to the questions that are brought to us.
Thank you, Martin. And on that note, I will thank you for an interesting presentation. At this point, we're moving on in the program to OpenKnowledge Maps. And Peter, Kraker and Beate Guba, please, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen with you. And then you can see this is a large collaboration. So we're working together with Andreas Ferus, Andrea Hacker, David Johann, Najme Shakai, and Guido Scherb. And would also like to thank Maxi Schramm, Oliver Lehner, and Katharina Rieber, who have co-created this presentation together with us. I'm joined today by Beate Guba. Beate, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
No, I think it's not necessary, because we want to talk so much on the content, or we want to spend so much time on the content. It's more important than me.
Excellent note. Yes, let's move on. My name is Peter Kraker, and I will take you through the first part that we have here. And I want to start with the motivation for our work, which is, I think, very well summed up in this image. We're seeing a flood of papers coming towards us in the coronavirus pandemic. More than 200,000 papers have been published to date. And that makes it very hard to get an overview of this topic. And once you have it, to then keep it. But it's not just coronavirus research that's really difficult to keep up with. Between 3 and 9 million research papers are published each year, and that makes discovery a problem in any discipline and almost any subject. And one of the reasons that exacerbates this discoverability crisis is that the tools that we have available for us to find literature. Search engines still reign supreme, but how do you actually get an overview of a scientific field using, for example, Google Scholar? I think what most people would do is that they type the name of the field into the search engine, and then you get hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of results. And since you cannot read 200,000 papers, what most people would do is to turn to highly cited overview work, go through this one, go through the references, and then basically go on to the next publication. The downside of this approach is that it takes a long time before an overview emerges, and this is time that we don't have in a global pandemic. And essentially, it's time that we never have. Discovery is always a process that falls short and that leaves blind spots in the process. And what is even worse is that even though Google Scholar is a huge resource, it's very limited to the output types that it provides. In a sense, it only includes scholarly articles and books. And this spells trouble for disciplines with a high bibliodiversity, such as the social sciences and the humanities. But it is even more difficult also for special collections that libraries maintain in a large number for them to get visible in Google Scholar. And in such, Google puts an invisible cloak on many of the outputs and many of the holdings that our research institutions and our libraries maintain. And this was the starting point for OpenKnowledge Map. And sorry, I was a bit distracted there. This was the starting point for OpenKnowledge Maps. And we are a charitable nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to dramatically improving the visibility of scientific knowledge. We want to do that for science, but also for all the other stakeholders in society. And our approach is to use knowledge maps for discovery, and they have a number of advantages over list-based interfaces in that you can see the main areas of the field at a glance. So in this case, for heart diseases, you have risk factors, types of diseases, and prevention. And you have relevant resources that are already attached to each of these areas, so you can get immediately started. From the theory to the practice, if you go to our website, openknowledgemaps.org, you can create a knowledge map of your own. We have integrated two data sources, PubMed, the big resource in the life sciences, and Base, the Bielefeld academic search engine, which gives an overview of 270 million outputs at this point. So you can really search in any discipline. You can then enter your research topic, for example, digital education, and we will then create a knowledge map for you. And as you can see, it looks very similar to the example that I showed you, in that we have the education, the different bubbles as the subtopics. So in this case, education systems, education policy, or down here, digital literacy. And once you've identified an area that you're really interested in, let's say this one up here on digital competence, you can then zoom into it. You can see the different resources that are related to this area. And once you've identified a paper that you're really interested in, and if it is open access, you can also preview it within the same interface. The advantages that we see is that you can get this bird's eye view of a field. You can identify relevant concepts, which is often the most difficult step in every discovery process. You can sort the relevant from the irrelevant, depending on your information need. So if you only want to stay within one area, you can do that and then branch out only later. And OpenKnowledge Maps is an interface over all scientific knowledge, open and closed, but we will always make it very easy for you to get to the open content, and we also offer additional services for it. How does it work? So an OpenKnowledge Maps visualization presents you with a topical overview for your search term, and it's based on the 100 most relevant documents from Base or PubMed for your search term. We use the definition of relevance from our data sources, and for both Base or PubMed, it is the subject similarity between your query and the metadata. We then use text similarity to create a knowledge map, and the algorithms group those papers closer together that have more words in common in the metadata. In detail, it looks like this. So we get the API results on the left-hand side onto our servers. Then we do a lot of pre-processing, including cleaning. We have a deduplication algorithm. We also infer missing subjects, missing keywords. And then we create a huge covert occurrence matrix, which is then the input for cluster labeling, and layout algorithms. And that creates a representation of the map, which is served to the front end. And on the front end, of course, there are also many aspects that we have to take into account, especially from cognitive science. And one of the aspects that we take into account is cognitive load. So we restrict the number of elements in each view so that our working memories don't get overloaded. We also take change blindness into account, and change blindness means that your brain at the end of an animation does not remember anymore how the scene looked at the very beginning. And so we use animations only when they are necessary, and we always try to provide ample context for orientation. We also, looking very much into recognition, we use real-world metaphors. So if you saw in our example, in our visualization, papers are represented as the icon of the paper and not as another circle, which makes it much easier to understand what is what in the image. Yeah, with this approach, we've become the largest visual search engine for research. Since May 2016, we had more than 1 million visits on our website. We're now close to 400,000 maps that have been created, and more than 3,500 participants, have joined our workshops around the world. We were also very happy to receive the Austrian Prize for Free Knowledge and the Open Minds Award. When I say we, I mean a team of employees and volunteers who create the service together with me. We also have an organizational member, the No Center of Graz University of Technology, which is my former institution. We also found many advisors from the open science and open knowledge world. As you can see, many people who are deeply ingrained also in the LIBER community are part of this group, and they're guiding us in the development of the organization and also of the platform. We're also happy to have found many partners because we see ourselves as a building block of the digital open science ecosystem, and as such, we do not want to reinvent the wheel, but rather collaborate with other initiatives out there. Yeah, we are a community-based initiative, and we're very happy to have a strong enthusiasts group. So these are power users and ambassadors from around the world, librarians, researchers, practitioners who run workshops in their own communities and then report the feedback back to us. And that enables us to take into account requirements from areas of the world that we can rarely go to. Yeah, and finally, I want to introduce you to our supporting and sustaining members. They're a very important group for us in OpenKnowledge Map. These are now 11 institutions. They do not only co-create the platform together with us, they also provide funding to maintain and further develop OpenKnowledge Maps. And this is especially important because all of our services are free and open. We're an open infrastructure in the truest sense that relates to our discovery service, to our training materials, our software, also our support and engagement programs and our trainings are always for free. And now we're very excited to introduce to you the custom services, which is another line of offerings that we're adding to our portfolio. And with the custom services, we want to enable institutions, we want to enable you to harness the full potential of OpenKnowledge Maps. We want you to allow a better overview of the resources and collections, and doing so by embedding OpenKnowledge Maps components in your services and based on your data. How could that look like in practice? So let's say you have a special collection, for example, the cartoon archive, but this could be really any collection, could also be a research data management system. Then you could embed this search box, and your patrons could then enter a search term, for example, political cartoons. And this would then create a map that is just on your data source on the cartoon archive and gives an overview of this collection in a new and unique way. Another potential use case is that you can complement your existing list-based discovery system with a knowledge map, and in that way enable use cases that haven't been possible so far with the pure list-based interface. And finally, you can also integrate these components in other parts of the university. For example, if you want to highlight the research that you've done in a blog or in a current research information system. On the technical side, it works as follows. So institutions, they export their data to Base, which is our main aggregator. And this is where we can then access it and provide custom cloud components back to you. And they can be customized in the sense that you can define the query that you send to us and also the sources that you want to run this query on. Yeah, that's it for me so far. And now I hand over to Beate Guba, the director of TU Wien Bibliothek, who will explain the context of TU Wien Bibliothek, and she will also introduce real-life use cases. So yes, please, Beate, take it away.
Thanks, Peter. In July 2020, TU Wien Bibliothek partnered up with OpenKnowledge Maps. We did so for several reasons. First of all, we share a common goal to enhance the visibility of research results across disciplinary boundaries and contribute to knowledge generation. After all, visibility is a prerequisite for knowledge reuse, and inter- or transdisciplinary research is crucial to generating new solutions in the face of today's significant challenges. And second, we chose OpenKnowledge Maps as it fits our strategic focus on open science and open infrastructures, which we want to support in the long term. Well, I cannot continue. I don't know why. Now, here it is, our next slide. This slide shows our digital infrastructure ecosystem. We use open source software for our institutional repository and our journal hosting platform. Other than that, we use commercial software with all the limitations that proprietary software brings. For instance, we have only minimal influence over the algorithm of our search engine Primo. As you can see, we offer so many tools that our users may become distracted or disoriented. Some tools overlap in terms of coverage and in coverage, and there are gaps in metadata quality that users are not necessarily aware of. For example, there are different metadata schemes and rules, incomplete metadata, different kinds of subject indexing, different classifications, different languages, different document versions like preprints, etc. In this age of digital transformation, rapid technological progress, and relentless data growth, we should accept that user behavior has changed. And I'm not only talking about people's skills, but also their approach and attitude. This is why we have to adapt our existing discovery tools, because one thing will never change. Discovery tools are at the heart of every library. Therefore, TU Wien Bibliothek is about to embed OpenKnowledge Maps components in its discovery tools. I will now present 3 use cases, which, to be clear, have not yet been implemented. Still, they show how we want to better support users, given the complexity of our data and infrastructures. The sketches are mock-ups designed by Maxi Stramm. So I have some technical problems. I don't know why. Because the host stopped my presentation.
Would you like me to advance the screen?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. So next slide, please. Camillo Sitter was a 19th century architect and urban theorist in Austria. His work was influential in urban planning and land use regulations. The library he built up was donated to TU Wien in 1963. The Cité Bequest Library is one of our unique collections we are very proud of. John, a 32-year-old postdoc in urban planning, is passionate about research on Camillo Sitte. What he needs is, on the one hand, a comprehensive overview of the recent research output on Sitte. On the other hand, John wants to gain a deeper insight into the various interests Sitte must have had based on the works he collected. This is because John wants to study Sitte's handwritten cross-references between the works he collected and the works he himself authored. Even John, a skilled scientist, finds it hard to discover this collection in the catalog. Please, next slide. John starts with a general search in Catalog Plus and finds all the literature available at TU Wien Bibliothek. That is, works written by Camillo Sitte or about Camillo Sitte. He does not go through the hit separately, but continues with the integrated OpenKnowledge Maps widget. It features a visual and topics-based approach. Next slide, please. Within the different topics, John can easily distinguish between the primary literature included in the Camillo Sitte works subset and the secondary sources in all other subsets. These other subsets indicate the specific research fields that deal with Sitte. As you can see, Sitte was influential in several fields, ranging from urban planning, theory of architecture, history of architecture to design. The size of each bubble corresponds to the number of relevant publications. Concepts that are close to each other express proximity or even overlap in terms of content. To get more details on the Cité Bequest Library, John clicks on the link below. Please, next slide. This OpenKnowledge map shows a very different picture. Sitte collected literature on art history, building history, archaeology, and took a great interest in classical antiquity, philosophy, linguistics, mythology, mathematics, and education. All these works never showed up in the previous search because they were written and published by others. Therefore, the general search term Camillo Sitte as an author or subject is just not appropriate for John's purposes. In addition, OpenKnowledge Maps uses artificial intelligence concepts to compensate for incomplete subject indexing. The customized search in OpenKnowledge Maps facilitates retrieval of and access to the holdings and therefore add great value for users. Our next use case deals with Tom. Tom is a 24-year-old student at TU Wien. He is enrolled in the Software Engineering and Internet Computing Master's Study Program. Tom is a keen student who wants to graduate as fast as possible. Efficiency is really important to him. He earned a bachelor's degree at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology and then decided to complete his higher education with a master's degree at TU Wien. Now, after the second semester of taking courses, he would like to get started with his thesis. Tom knows little about good scientific practice, the standards of scientific work applied at TU Wien, or which topics have already been covered. He is eager to dive in and learn more about all this by reading some master's thesis. He uses the institutional repository to answer his search question. His field of interest is the industrial Internet of Things. Tom enters his field of interest into the repository search box and gets 350 hits. He filters for thesis, but is unable to quickly identify the master's thesis belonging to his own study program, because the different programs are not mentioned in the full text and they are not browsable as metadata. Clicking on every title to get more information or browsing through the Faculty of Informatics would be rather tedious. In this sketch, we already added menu items like links to different knowledge maps, which are currently not available, but I hope will soon be. Tom can now choose master thesis, and he gets a visualized presentation of theses assigned to different bubbles with keywords. I think we need the next slide, yes. Due to this presentation with keywords, Tom can now determine which bubbles might belong to his study program. By screening the bubbles software engineering, blockchain, and cloud computing, he quickly identifies a set of relevant theses he wants to study that will help him understand the requirements and standards for his own scientific work. Next slide, please. Eve is 48 years old and head of the library IT department. Before that, she worked as a subject librarian for 20 years. After all these years, she still loves metadata. Eve is responsible for the library's primary discovery tool, Catalog Plus. All the library's print collections, journals licensed by the library, ebooks and open access publications are indexed in this discovery tool. TU Wien has a strong commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are becoming more and more important for all Austrian universities due to the performance agreements between the ministry and the universities. This is why Eve wants to make sure that the discovery tools provide better access to Austrian research contributions to the SDGs. Highlighting the library's role as a knowledge hub and fostering knowledge transfer to the public is essential to her. Open access publications play a significant role in this context. The publications of TU Wien members are difficult to identify in Catalog Plus because our name authority files in ALMA are incomplete and not regularly updated concerning the author's affiliation. In addition, the search engine of the Austrian Library Network does not contain the full range of Austrian open access publications. Please, next slide. The query Sustainable Development Goals renders several thousand hits in Catalog Plus. As an information specialist, Eve knows how to filter the search result, but she is not still satisfied with the unstructured result list. OpenKnowledge Maps support a more intuitive discovery. Eve integrates 3 widgets in Catalog Plus to better present the different Sustainable Development Goals, provide a better overview of the corresponding research output. The first map shows the library holdings on Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs for which the library holds the most publication. Then we come to the second map. The second map shows the topics and Sustainable Development Goals that TU Wien has been focusing on in its publications. This picture illustrates the research priorities of TU Wien. If necessary, it can also be used within the library to review our collection profile. For the third map, thank you. For the third map, I will only highlight the most important facts without going into further detail. It gives a kind of nationwide overview. The third map serves as a search extension, as it includes data from 53 Austrian repositories that deliver metadata to base. This way, users can be made aware of many open access publications that are not provided by TU Wien Bibliothek. We will perhaps also draw attention to this feature in the menu bar by including a kind of customized selection, as we showed earlier with the links in the repository.
Yeah, I wanted to also very quickly show you the use case of ETH Zurich that we've been working on. ETH also wants to include OpenKnowledge Map as part of their library discovery system. It's called Swisscovery. And in their case, you can still enter your search term, for example, in this case, serious disease-resistant genomics, and then you get the list-based approach, but you could also click on other search tools, and then you would be transported to this screen where you can send your query to other search and discovery tools, and one of them is OpenKnowledge Maps. Of course, this is a more simple integration than the ones that were shown before, but it also something that can be added very quickly and will be available as early as this fall. Back to you, Beate.
To sum up, let me list the benefits of OpenKnowledge Maps for TÜ Wien Bibliothek. OpenKnowledge Maps visualize and contextualize. By offering a different perspective on our data and collections, the maps allow users to get oriented quickly and gain an overview. Intuitive search features may also attract new audiences beyond academia. We can use OpenKnowledge Maps to complement our existing approaches and to deliver a great user experience. In addition, OpenKnowledge Maps allows us to improve the quality of our metadata and search results. One major reason for that is that we can use it to complement incomplete metadata. In other words, it allows us to open up our library information silos and bring as yet hidden knowledge to the surface. Of course, we have to invest library resources, please next slide, to develop and test the use cases and deliver the corresponding metadata to base. But the staff deployment is manageable. Also, we are pleased that our cultural heritage will become more visible worldwide and that the focus is on open access. This way, we as a library are happy to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals in a democratic, inclusive, peaceful society.
To round out the presentation, I would like to quickly tell you about our funding model, which is a community-based model. We propose to fund OpenKnowledge Maps in a collective effort, meaning that organizations become supporting members and provide a yearly contribution. And in return, we invite our members to co-create the platform together with us. Members become part of the board of supporters, which is directly involved in the decision-making process of what features and sources are implemented on OpenKnowledge Maps. In practice, this means you have 1/3 of the vote on the technical roadmap. The other 2/3 are with the wider community and with OpenKnowledge Maps itself. With this, we hope to balance the different requirements of our stakeholders. We have 3 membership categories: supporting member, sustaining member, and sustaining member plus, giving you a different number of seats on the board of supporters, but they also signify whether you would like to maintain OpenKnowledge Maps as it is on the left-hand side or further develop it and improve it in the future, which is on the right-hand side. We also welcome, of course, feedback on the membership fee scheme, on the membership model. One feedback that we're actively looking into is to provide reduced rates for low and middle income countries and smaller organizations so that they can more easily join us. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention and extend a warm welcome for you to join our collaboration, be it as a partner, a supporting member, or as an enthusiast. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you both. There was one question in the chat that I believe Beate has already answered. And if you are wondering whether Beate's video is not working, it was turned off and apparently by the host, and it's not possible to turn it on. But I have 2 questions, one for Beate and one for Peter, that you maybe could elaborate on. The first, Beate, you mentioned the case of, there your camera. You mentioned Eve prominently in your presentation, who has worked 20 years in libraries. And I am also from the management side extremely occupied with transferable skills. And it seems that you have library personnel that are able to work in this project or with Peter. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? What kind of staff and how you are doing that?
Yes, we have staff with IT skills in the library, and I always try to get to hire people from different disciplines, not only IT, but also other disciplines. So I think we have to be more diverse in the library. The staff members should be more diverse, yes. But I'm very happy that there are a lot of staff members with enough IT skills in the library, yes.
And building on that, Peter, it seems that this is sort of the model partnership between library and I wouldn't even call you a startup, because you know you have been in business for quite a few years. But could you elaborate? You and your staff works on a daily basis with Beate and her staff. Is that how it happens in reality?
So I don't think we could say that we work together on a daily basis, but I think we work together regularly. And I think that's the point, right? You have a continuous kind of collaboration with the stakeholders of the platform. And that's how we actually do it, not only with our supporting members, but also with the rest of the community. Of course, also our resources are very limited. We're a charitable nonprofit. But we definitely see this as one of our highest priorities, to be inclusive. In that way, we want to keep up this high level of engagement.
Thank you for that. And looking a little bit on the time, I have one last question, maybe for both of you, or for you, Peter. What I'm extremely impressed about is the diversity of materials that are offered here, and I'm sort of thinking about, in the best of open sense, this material, could that be applied to or worked into the curriculum of schools, high schools, university students, and try to be applied in that way? And have you any thoughts on that it might spread into that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in BASE, there is already a quite sizable chunk of educational resources, and they can be accessed. I think they could be better annotated, in a sense that you really can make a better division between educational materials and research materials. But other than that, definitely I can see that happening, and there have already been some preliminary, getting to know each other with the OER world. Even though we're more included on the research side, I think that's definitely a possibility. And students are our second largest user group after researchers, and a very sizable user group at that.
Thank you for that, Beate and Peter. We will now move to the last part of our webinar today. And for that, I warmly welcome our three colleagues from Canada, Heather, Jamie, and Brianne. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just before we begin, we acknowledge that the University of Winnipeg is situated on ancestral lands. Oh, sorry, my dog in the background. On Treaty 1 territory, the heartland of the Métis people. I'm Jamie Orr, and my co-presenter is Heather Sanders. Joining us afterwards for questions is Brianne Selman, and our fellow contributor not with us today is Laura Arneson.
Hi, everyone. In the next 10 minutes, we'll be highlighting Early Career Researcher Day, hosted by our institution with local partners. Specifically, we'll cover challenges, goals, how we met those goals, and also future directions. If you come away inspired to host a similar event, please email us by the end of June for our forthcoming toolkit.
At the University of Winnipeg, we perceived a number of challenges for early career researchers, or ECRs. ECRs can be constrained by academic norms, preconceptions of what defines success, and racial, gender, and other minority barriers. Our colleague Brianne was seeking ways to connect with researchers early in their careers to support their navigation of barriers. and encourage open knowledge sharing. Aware that ECRs tend to be interested in open access, but are sometimes redirected by more established mentors, Brianne liaised with colleagues about programming to address this issue. I should add that open access is integral to grant compliance per our national policy, yet there's a tendency toward non-compliance. At the University of Winnipeg, the library and the research office recognized and aimed to address these ECR challenges, but were trying unsuccessfully to solve them as separate units. Historically, we are administratively lean and understaffed in the research office and in the library. In fact, we have one of the lowest librarian to student ratios in Canada. As a primarily undergraduate institution, we don't have PhD programs, a medical school, or law school, so our researchers are often partners on projects with researchers outside of the university. Another challenge is the substantial lag between our rapidly growing research revenue and our ability to support it. While our revenue has increased, our staffing complement hasn't, so we don't have liaison librarians in many of the developing areas such as health research. Without formal opportunities to connect and collaborate, ECRs don't always know where to start to find mentors, create professional networks outside their institution, or who to talk to for information about funders and programs. An initial assessment revealed no inter-institutional knowledge sharing opportunities engaging ECRs in our province within Canada, presenting a terrific opportunity for outreach.
Thanks, Jamie. With these challenges in mind, we identified goals for an event catering specifically to ECRs in the province of Manitoba. We wanted to be engaging to generate and maintain the interest of attendees by meeting real identified needs of ECRs. And we recognize that researchers with successful grants were not fully considering the implementation aspects of their awards, including funder requirements for open access and also research data management. Nor were they fully considering all funder expectations such as equity, diversity, and inclusion, knowledge mobilization, and contracts. Thus, we set out to address these knowledge gaps in ECRs. Additionally, we aim to leverage and build networks across the provinces between ECRs and also between research support staff and librarians.
To meet these goals, we devised Early Career Researcher Day for 2020, then adapted the event with the same goals in mind for a virtual space in 2021. Year 1 was all about collaboration, and Year 2 was very much about adaptation. In Year 1, to best serve our stakeholders, we invited ECRs to attend our initial planning meeting. We then coordinated a combination of panels and workshops based on gaps they had shared, plus our own observations. Behind the scenes, connections were key. For example, liaising was important for securing institutional funding to launch the event. And to reduce barriers, we wanted the institution to absorb costs so attendees could enjoy free programming. As the primary host, we also maximized regional expertise, broadening our planning committee beyond our own institution to add to the diversity of perspectives and expand our resources. For instance, partnering with a larger peer, the University of Manitoba, gave us access to specialist expertise from their research support team.
And we were pleased that a number of attendees from the inaugural event returned for the second event, and also that we were hosting nearly double the number of prior attendees. And that brings me to discussing Year 2. So in 2021, we faced a challenge that was really pervasive in the conference circuit and library profession. How could we adapt in-person content to a remote environment? In terms of new challenges that we faced, professional networking and collaboration opportunities had basically ground to a halt, and we wanted to rise to the occasion despite the risk of Zoom fatigue. Recognizing the complexity of virtual events, we expanded our planning team by involving our provincial funding body, Research Manitoba, and also additional research institutions. And then in terms of adapting content, we kept the subject matter fairly consistent from Year 1 to Year 2, with a condensed day to cater to shorter attention spans and conflicting obligations like homeschooling. Door prizes enticed attendees to return after breaks. To reduce technical difficulties and stay on schedule, we encourage presenters to submit recorded content played by our tech team. This had the added benefit of allowing moderators to preview content and brainstorm questions in advance. One programming adjustment was the finale. In the first year, we ended with a playful wheel of misfortune, where our colleagues spun the wheel and attendees determined if their mock research projects could adapt accordingly. In year 2, the proverbial wheel had already landed on global pandemic, making the exercise a bit close to home. So instead, we ended with a new panel, Resilience in Research, to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on academia. Adapting the workshop to an online format was the most difficult challenge. With group work, there's always a risk of lack of focus, so we kept groups small and we introduced workshop facilitators, who are a combination of research administrators, experienced researchers, research grant managers, and professional research facilitators. We had to work around the limitations of Zoom, such as managing breakout rooms, and we held a Train the Trainers Day for facilitators, helping everything run smoothly. And over to you, Jamie.
The structure of the day for ECR Day Year 1 and Year 2 followed a similar schedule despite the change in delivery. We started each day with a morning panel dedicated to funder mandates and priorities, followed by a Q&A, then the first workshop. In this workshop, participants were asked to share their research summaries and devise an idea for a collaborative research project eligible for funding. In the afternoon, 2 more panels covered such topics as budgeting, ethics, research data management, and open access. Each panel was then followed by a workshop where the same groups reconvened to apply lessons learned from the speaker panels on these topics. Groups responded to prompts, for example, about ethics considerations, encouraging them to apply their new knowledge from the day to their shared project. The workshops were based on a similar ECR event in 2012 by Dr. Addie Brown at the University of Aberdeen.
In terms of our outcomes, not only did ECR Day successfully address significant challenges, but our user-centered event was extremely well received. We distributed evaluation forms, generating overwhelmingly positive feedback. We had 45 responses in Year 1 and 23 in Year 2. Because ECRs recognized this event as an opportunity to connect with other ECRs, they were keen to attend, changing a tradition of poor participation in outreach programming. The formation of connections was a theme common to our outcomes. Brianne promoted open publishing choices and the democratization of knowledge in a way that was not overly didactic and was thus more palatable. We facilitated ECR networks, which was especially important during the pandemic. And regionally, we increased connections across institutions and shared knowledge ranging from health research to contracts. And lastly, the internal professional network of research administrators, librarians, and research experts that grew organically can be leveraged for future events and training opportunities.
When thinking about the future of ECR Day, there are a few considerations. First, to be mindful of our limited human resources, we hope to centralize or rotate hosting with a provincial funder or other research active institutions in the province at the helm. To facilitate this and also inspire colleagues further afield, we are finalizing a planning kit with communications templates and documentation of steps. Second, to scale the event, we can picture industry involvement as sponsors or partners in some capacity. External support could also allow for 2 developments: expanding the day-long event into a multi-day affair in response to feedback from panelists and attendees, and broadening the target audience from ECRs to students and more advanced researchers based on popular demand. ECR Day would not have been possible without our peers, whom we want to thank here.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to any questions or comments that you have. And beyond the next 10 minutes, feel free to reach out to us through our contact information on the screen and also in the program. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Jamie. I always find it interesting when colleagues have experiences with researchers and also early career researchers up close and personal, which I am assuming that you will get to know these early career researchers fairly well. So I have a question, or maybe something you can elaborate on, because I think knowledge from my own library is that researchers is a really, really diverse group, even early career researchers. And you are mentioning that you are addressing knowledge gaps, I guess you are calling it. So could you elaborate a little bit? What are their knowledge of open access, data management, things like that when they come into your program? Are they absolutely like blank, or are there groups that are actually well versed? And could you elaborate a little bit on the background of the people that you have in the program?
Sure, I can speak to that a bit. We'd find sort of out of any given group of 10, there might be one who's really passionate about one particular area. So they've been introduced to open access in some format and have really latched onto it. But we found also that no one person knew everything. Certainly everyone sort of had gaps that they needed filled. The publication considerations that I gave, which in a different format might have been called predatory publishing, although I really try to avoid using that. That got a lot of really positive feedback and really detailed questions because people are typically earlier in their publishing trajectory at that point. So again, they might have had one or two really specific experiences, but then not that breadth of experience. And also because not many of the early career researchers that were there had some of the larger grants, certainly the awareness of the grant requirements. Again, you'd find one or two that had maybe had a graduate grant or those kinds of things. But here, actually, the graduate grant requirements are for open access aren't nearly as onerous as the post-grad grants. So yeah, very, very spotty, I would say. But yes, deep domain knowledge in some areas occasionally too as well. And that's also exciting because then you get the people who are champions in that area communicating that with their peers.
I could speak to the knowledge of research data management in Canada. The policy landscape around research data management is changing quickly, and our major funders just released a research data management policy with a data deposit requirement. So all researchers in Canada are sort of looking at this policy from a new perspective and are approaching it sort of from scratch for the most part. So that includes early career researchers who are coming to our event and really just learning about the policy for the first time.
Thank you. And as I begin to wrap up, I will say we did a library citizen science project in Denmark, where I come from and work. And one of the work packages was RDM in citizen science. And of course, at the host of that is fair open data. And what we found out was that most researchers, even if they work in citizen science or open science, are actually not very familiar with the term of fair data and sharing. So that work package, of course, surveyed some cases and worked with the researchers. But what was really the outcome was some knowledge on how to facilitate or even market it to researchers in the future. And I don't know if you have any sort of experience or anything related to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of this event in itself, we're sort of trying to package a bunch of things in one, but giving space to each in their own right, because similar to your experience, our attendees were, not familiar with research data management and all the language around research data management. So in some ways it was more of an introductory, I guess, an introductory session rather than a deep dive. And now we're kind of doing the work of individually as institutions supporting researchers with wrapping their heads around what's required of them now with this new policy.
Thank you. As we are at the last few minutes of this webinar, I would like to thank all the speakers for the presentations and the audience for joining us. I hope you're having a good LIBER conference that will continue tomorrow. I think one of the things yesterday, I was in a workshop called with the SHOCK project, which is social science and humanities within citizen science. And I think some of the presentations that we have heard today really gives me hope that libraries and open systems can help facilitate the migration of open science and citizen science away from perhaps the more traditional position, if we call it that, into new areas. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters today. As I see no more questions in the chat, we will wrap up a little bit early. So thank you everyone for coming. And again, hope that you enjoy the rest of LIBER. Thank you for now.
Thank you. Bye.